Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle, where experts in the field inform, educate and inspire the community to be healthier, more balanced and live the lifestyle they love. Our first guest today is breathwork and life coach Christine Hart-Savage, and the topic we'll be discussing is feeling lost and the soul connection. Welcome, Christine.
It's lovely to be back, Megan. Thank you.
Christine, how would you define feeling lost for our viewers?
That is one of my favourite subjects because I spent most of my life feeling lost, or this feeling of yearning. I was always looking for something else. When I was a child, I used to drive my parents nuts because I asked them, who was I before I was born? Where do we go when we die? I don't know. There's got to be something else, and they didn't know how to answer these questions. So I tended to suppress them. But I've always yearned, always thought about life since I was very little. There has to be something else. We can't just appear on earth and then disappear. There has to be more to it. And I spent my life really thinking about this and yearning for this other connection, and I didn't even know what I was looking for. But I did find it through my breakdown, through starting to have to turn within myself. I started to open up another part to myself. But one of my earlier experiences, a girlfriend of mine asked me to a particular meditation group when I was about 24, and I'd never been. And we had our little children in a creche there, and we went in to this particular place, and I was a bit confronted by it because there were some people there in like orange gowns and shaved heads, and I thought, what is going on here? And I was really quite daunted by it because I didn't understand that world. So we went in and we were sitting on a wooden floor, and there was this particular young woman taking the class, and she was leading us through this, what I called a relaxation. So firstly, she said to us, look, lay down now. And I laid down, and as soon as I laid down and I was listening to her voice, I started to relax. And suddenly there was a big tunnel, and I was moving through this tunnel, and I felt like I was moving very, very fast, but there was no resistance or anything like wind or anything like that, but moving fast. And when I looked up, there was this blazing light at the top, and I became frightened because I thought, oh, what happens when I go through the end of that tunnel? Will I die? And as soon as I had that thought, bang, it disappeared. And as soon as I relaxed again, it appeared again, and I was travelling through this tunnel. Now, I didn't tell anybody about this experience because I thought it was very weird. So the next week we went back, and the following week we were going through these same type of exercise she was leading us through, and we were sitting cross-legged on the floor, and suddenly, this is going to sound weird, but it's the truth. I had this little, like an umbilical cord coming out of my own belly button with a tiny little embryo floating in the air. And I thought, oh my goodness, I opened my eyes, it was there. I closed my eyes and it was there. And it just stayed with me the whole time. And when we finished the session, we were speaking to, they were swamis, I found out later. We were speaking to the swamis, and I told them about my two experiences. And they said, that's not fair. We've been meditating for years and we haven't had those experiences. I didn't ever go back because I was frightened of what I experienced at that time. So going forward, when I went through my really dark night of the soul, my challenging time in my relationship, I had difficulties with my children, and my marriage broke up, and I had a breakdown. I went back into learning meditation and discovering and uncovering that part of myself. And lo and behold, back came this, what I now know is the tube of light that comes down around you, which forms this incredible tunnel that is part of us. It's a tunnel of light, and we're all connected to this. But I had a lot of experiences that happened that I did not understand, Megan. And I'm sure there's our viewers out there that are having experiences off and on that they don't understand either, or they may be yearning for that connection. So the emptiness I was feeling suddenly started to fill and became a feeling of connection, a feeling of belonging that I had never felt before I went through these experiences. So the yearning started to disappear, the emptiness started to disappear. And I think that spiritual connection, that soul connection as I call it, fills that emptiness inside. And what I've realised is that we are a part of something much greater and much more magnificent than we realise. I started to realise there's so much more to us than we know. And this has been a continuous journey over the last 35 years of me really unfolding these deeper layers, because we're eternal. There's these eternal layers of wisdom and knowledge that is inside us. And it keeps opening and opening and opening to this wonderful, wonderful knowledge, this incredible wisdom once it is integrated into our body.
Christine, if the viewers and I are interested in connecting with our soul, what do you recommend?
Well, definitely to start meditating daily, because in that harmony and peace that you eventually get to, at first you won't experience that. You'll experience a busy mind, but we have to stick with it. Eventually you'll have pockets of sinking into yourself and experiencing a lovely calm and peace and harmony. When we're in that, this energy starts to flow through us. So that when we do enough of that, we start to develop in a different way. We expand, our consciousness expands, our wisdom expands. The other thing I'd like to touch on here, if I may, Megan, is that I had this wake-up call also that I wasn't necessarily fixed. We're not fixed. That I had the ability and the intelligence we're all given to look at who I'm choosing to be in life. I didn't have to be how I was. I could choose it. I could choose my thoughts. I could choose the way I wanted to feel, and I could choose my actions and my delivery in life and lead my life rather than being just blown around by life itself, because every day we could do that and just react and start looking within, because everything we need is inside us.
Christine, that's such fantastic information. If you'd like to know more about feeling lost in the soul connection and Christine Hart-Savage, please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we'll have another interesting guest with another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, animal communicator and therapist Carolyn Pope talks animal communication and breaking down the barriers. Welcome back. Now we have Carolyn Pope in the studio, and she is an animal communicator and therapist, and we're going to be discussing animal communication, overcoming barriers. Hi Carolyn, welcome.
Hey.
Now I wanted to ask, if are different human languages a barrier to animal communication? So if you were working on communicating with an animal that wasn't from an English-speaking country, how does that affect things?
Only from the point of view, I sadly only have English. I don't speak a second language. Providing the person on the other end can also speak English as a second language, it's not an issue, because the animal doesn't speak a language per se. They use telepathics. So telepathics doesn't have a language. The biggest problem I actually find with my international people is simply some of the accents I can struggle a little bit to understand, and apparently I have a very broad Aussie accent and very few can understand me. That seems to be the biggest barrier.
So it's a human issue, not
It's
an
a
animal
human
issue.
issue, not an animal issue.
How does it work? How do you communicate with animals?
For those of you that have seen The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, great trilogy, think of the babble fish. For those that haven't, the babble fish was something that you put in your ear and it'd swim around and it would simultaneously translate any language right throughout the universe. And essentially that's what happens, because it's all about thought. If you're, say, a diplomat and you want to say something to someone who only speaks Russian and someone who only speaks Dutch, the thought pattern's the same. What you want to say might be the same, but the languages are different. So the animal's thought pattern, to me, is always going to be the same. It just happens that I only speak English, therefore I need another English-speaking person on the other end of the phone. The animal doesn't have a language per se. It's all telepathics, it's all energetic thought.
How does the difference between species affect animal communication?
Hugely. That's the biggest job of any animal communicator, is advocating for species difference. You're not going to roll in horse poo and eat it, at least I'm assuming you're not. Your dog will. Dog's not going to jump on Google and Google animal communication. One of my cats once said to me, "Murdering birdies is good for my stress levels. You should try it sometime." Murdering birdies wasn't going to do anything for my stress levels. Drinking coffee wasn't going to do anything for the cat. And everything is within species. You can't blame a dog for being a dog any more than if a horse gets a fright, it's going to shy or bolt, because that's what horses do. And the biggest problem is people that consider themselves animal communicators that have no species awareness. I remember one lady, and look, she was a human psychologist, she was very good, but she'd been speaking to these people with this very, very troubled dog, and they told me what they were doing, and I just went, no, that's crap. You actually do the complete opposite. And within 5 minutes, that dog was lying down, it hadn't laid down for 3 weeks, because the signals they were giving to the dog was actually upsetting the dog. When you understand the species, you understand how to change your signals, because any animal's like a computer. They can only go by the information you're giving. And you're giving any animal information 24/7, 365. The problem is we're not aware of the information we're giving because we can only see things from our species parameters. My computer guy puts it really well. He says it's like giving Mac commands to a Windows computer and going, why isn't this working? They're two different operating systems. A cat and a dog and a human have 3 different operating systems, and then add that to every species.
So could you please give our viewers some advice on communicating with their animals? Are there any general things to look out for?
Start with someone else's, because you're too close to your own. In the same way, a doctor doesn't treat their own children, or a clairvoyant doesn't generally read. You need to know you're able to communicate, and you know your own too well. You can't detach what is you from what is them. And also you need feedback. You need to know whether you're on the right trail. I mean, having said that, sometimes you'll get something that's just so weird you couldn't possibly have thought it up. And that's when you know it's coming from the animal. But most of the time, practice on others and get others to practice on yours, and start with it that way. Because it's like, a kid's not often going to tell his mum what's going on, but he'll tell a third party. It's exactly the same. So work with that to start with and build up the relationship and the rapport from there.
When you say practice, like what sort of things would you do, say, with a friend's dog? What would you observe?
They might, for example, say, all right, here's a list of 4 questions. See what answers you get. And that's a good one for you. But they need to be answers that the owners know. For example, dogs in shelters. Any dog in a shelter will tell you anything it needs to get out of there rather than being euthanized. But also people like to get stuck in the past and, it's because he was a shelter dog till he was 6 months old. Well, yeah, you've had him 12 years and he's still a brat. What's your excuse? People like to keep their animals in victim mode, but they can't know what's gone on. So there's no point in asking what happened while you're in the shelter, or how many homes or whatever have you had before, when you're starting to learn, if the owner can't validate that, because they need to be questions that the owner 100% knows.
So that's you asking in English the dog a question.
Yeah, you might give me a list of 4 questions, and it might be what does Fido like to eat? Where does he like to go? Some of his favourite activities. And then I'll take a photo and tune in, write down the answers and give them to you. And you can go, those 2 are right. No idea why you said that. I'll try feeding it to him, see whether he likes it or not, and get back to you. Because you need to know you're on the right path. And it's like a muscle. You don't use it, you lose it. But start with little bits, because you don't go out and run a marathon. As Tuvok used to say, you don't get out of a wheelchair and do advanced aerobics. You don't run a marathon to start with. Little bits and build up. And that's the thing. If I said to you, we're going to learn ancient Egyptian or Latin, no one's going to expect to be fluent in a day, and using the Egyptian, go in and read Tut's tomb. And yet everybody expects to be able to communicate fluently and instantaneously within a day. And sadly, for 99.99% of the population, it takes work. But the rewards are always worth it.
Well, that is fascinating. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
You're very welcome.
If you want to know more about Carolyn Pope and language and communication with animals, please go to her webpage on our website at healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au, and we'll be right back after this break with another amazing guest.
Stay tuned. After the break, urban food specialist Marc Noyce will be talking about how to create your own urban edible garden. Welcome back. Our next guest is urban food specialist Marc Noyce, and the topic we're here to discuss today is how to create your own edible garden. Welcome, Marc.
Hi Megan, thanks for having me.
So Marc, what are some of the challenges we face in creating our own edible garden?
I grew up on a market garden myself, and I had broadacre farming. I had all the farming tools associated with a big urban farm. And it took a lot of work. But I tell you, when you get into our urban environment where there's a concrete jungle, it's that much harder again to grow your own food at home. So some of the challenges are having the right space, having the right aspects so that you get the right light onto your plants, because let's face it, some plants need a lot more light than others. Lettuce might only need 4 to 5 hours a day, whereas tomatoes and some other sun-loving plants need up to 10 hours a day of sunlight, so they need to be in full sun. So that's a challenge, getting the light and the aspect right, getting your nutrition right for your plants, getting the right nutrients in there, getting a high quality compost or a high quality potting mix. That's very important as well, to keep that nutrition up to feed the plants. We all like to get fed well, so do our plants, and they need to get fed well too, to get the best out of them. Another very important thing to remember is having access to water. Plants like water access all the time. If a plant doesn't get, and especially vegetables, if a plant doesn't get what they need in terms of water access, they go, I'm not going to be around here much longer, so I'm going to go to seed. I'm going to fulfill my life's mission, and I'm going to just go to seed. And we call that bolting, when a vegetable doesn't like its water environment. It gets too stressed. It releases a little hormone that says, hey, go to seed. So getting that water right for your plants, you can either be out there watering all day, you can be out there watering morning, noon and night just to keep that optimal water up to your plants, or you can set your garden up much easier with wicking garden beds, for example.
Marc, what are the benefits of having an edible garden?
The benefits are just enormous in terms of your mental health, in terms of your physical nutrition, in terms of you connecting with your friends and family and your community. So let's have a look at those aspects of an urban edible garden. I love going out to my own garden and knowing where my food comes from, looking at these plants and watching them grow and being part of that, and then understanding exactly what I put into those plants so that I know that I'm getting really fresh, organic produce that is just tasty and nutritious and just fantastic to eat. The benefits also getting involved in knowing where your food comes from, and also communicating with your friends and family that maybe you haven't seen for a while. So let's grow some beetroots. Grow some beetroots and then make some beetroot relish, and in a very small place you can grow 3 kilos of beetroot in 2 months in half a square metre, make a relish that can go to 5 or 6 people in your family, and your friends will love you. And not only that, you're getting so much satisfaction out of growing your own food. You're getting a lot of satisfaction about getting in contact with people that you might not have seen for a while, and you're starting that conversation again. You're increasing your mental health, you're helping others, and then you can give back something to your community as well. On a broader scale, you can grow food for your neighbours, you can get people involved into a community garden, and you can just have an enormous uplifting of self-confidence and community confidence about closing your nutrient loops, reusing water for food, and I'm just rambling on, I shouldn't have said that.
Marc, can I grow the same plant over and over again?
Well, you can, but if you don't do certain things to keep ensuring that the potting mix is fresh, if you don't remove the biomass that's, the root systems, the stem of the plant, for example, you can't just keep planting in the same spot all the time. It's gardening 101. You look at our farmers turn over the soil and they recompost and they re-add nutrient, and they just make sure that the growing media is fresh and optimal after every season that the vegetables come out of. We've got to do the same for our own environment, our own containerised growing in urban environments. So yes, you can, but if you don't refresh your potting mix, if you don't deal with the biomass that's created when a vegetable puts its tremendous root systems down, then you're not going to get the best out of it. And some plants really suck the nutrient out of potting mix. And let's face it, what a plant is doing is it's taking that energy that's in the potting mix and they're converting it into biomass and something yummy that we like to eat. So it's just a big energy transfer. So when that vegetable's done, we've got to put more energy back into the soil. And that's through refreshing the compost, refreshing the potting mix with either nutrient, soluble fertiliser, or some of our green waste. We can actually put our green waste back into the soil to grow more nutritious food.
That's fantastic. So Marc, what's some advice you've got for our audience in creating their own edible garden?
My advice would be to think about what you're going to grow. Think about where you're going to grow it. Think about what you're going to grow it in, and then make a plan. We need to also think about how we're going to manage our vegetable garden, edibles, by getting the right sunlight, getting the right aspect, protecting them from bugs with either netting, protecting them from really harsh conditions like wind through netting and shade cloth, and thinking about crop rotation, thinking about what am I going to plant in the potting mix after my tomatoes come out, and maybe you put onions in there, and then you swap that over after you've reset your nutrition in your potting mix.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thanks so much for that great information, Marc. If you'd like to know more about Marc Noyce and how to create your own edible garden, please go to his webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And that's all for us today, so we'll say bye-bye for now, and we'll see you next week.
If you'd like to know more about our show, please like our Facebook page and also subscribe to our YouTube channel.